Well, guess what? Barstool and Bandtalkers. I'm Dave McPherson, and I'm Dave McPherson. There is no Sean Mckinnon this morning. He's got some stuff on the go, but I'm bringing you the very special interview with our good friend, and I can't even tell you a whole lot about it yet because you're going to be blown away. Quite honestly, probably one of the biggest contributors to the music scene and maritime music is our next guest. An accomplished musician, vocalist, guitarist, entrepreneur. You might know him from a little store called Musicstop, solo recording, the Canadian Conservatory, from playing around the bars since the early 60s. I want you to please welcome to our show, Mr. Russ Brannon. There he is. Good morning, Russell. How are you, sir?
Very good, very good. Thank you.
So you get Dave McPherson solo today. That's how it's going to work. So.
Oh, well, I guess I should consider myself lucky. Get all your attention.
Yeah, Sean's just a drummer. He's just a drummer anyhow.
Oh, he's not a real musician, right?
Yeah. He's the guy that carries all the gear, right?
That's right, yeah.
All right, so Russ, please, thank you very much for being on the show. We appreciate it. I know it's a nice day out there. I want you to get some golf into. It's going to be a good day for golf, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
So let's start at the beginning. And so you're from Dartmouth.
Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Yeah.
How did music start for you? Yeah, me too. Me too. Yeah. How did music enter your life?
You know, it entered my life when I was about 14 years old, 13, 14 years old. I had an uncle who played country and Western music on his dobro, and I loved the sound of it. You know, when you think about it, back in those days, you heard stuff on your little kitchen radio with a 5-inch speaker, and you know, I'd sit there with my ear to that because I just love music. But the only music really in my background, immediate family, was my grandmother on the Brannon side. She used to play for the silent movies. She was the pianist. And every once in a while, she'd come to the house. We had an old piano down in the hall downstairs. I lived on Windmill Road.
Okay.
And I remember the first time I was upstairs and this incredible, magical sound just come flowing up the stairs. And it was her playing. And that just, the most wonderful thing. So, I knew that I had sort of it was like a magnet to me.
Yep.
And then of course, my sister started taking piano lessons. And all of a sudden I was playing all the lessons too, you know, and I never stuck with the piano. I probably should have. No, but anyway, that's kind of where it started. It was with my uncle, and then of course I started playing with my cousin, his son, and I really got into the guitar. And by the time I was 16, I was like playing in, you know, a band and I even played in a bar in Halifax where I had to stay in the kitchen because they would sit in the bar because I was too young to be in the bar, but I was allowed to be on stage with the group.
So what bar was it? Do you remember?
I wish I could remember. I was actually thinking about that the other day, and it was, I think it was the corner of Gottingen and Kennard, and I don't know what it was back in those days. It was a little small bar. It might come to me one of these days, but you know what? I don't mind glancing back. I just don't stare.
You know what? I like that line. It's true. It's true. And that's kind of what we try to do on the show. Like it's important to catalog the history, but it's the here and now and the future. So if you kind of look back, it's good to know where you came from, to know where you're going, but you can't just stay there. That's a very good point, Russ. That's great. All right. So that brings us to, I don't know what year this would be. What, late 50s, early 60s then, or? That
would be like 60, 61, 62.
Okay.
You know, when I really got started actually playing in groups.
Okay. So what was your first professional gig? Long term, I guess.
Well, professionally, we used to play at the Bedford Yacht Club.
Okay.
And we were regular there on Saturday nights, and yeah, that was a professional gig. One of the ones we used to play at the colored people's home out in Westfall. We were hired to play out there.
Oh, sorry.
And yeah, that was kind of a neat thing. You know, there was some great dancing going on.
So what kind of music were you playing then, Russ? Like you had the early country influence from your uncle and the silent movie gig from your grandmother. So, but what kind of music were you listening to and wanted to play?
It was early rock and roll, rockabilly, and we always played instrumentals because I was very big into surf guitar. I was a real surf guitar player. I knew everything that Ventures ever recorded.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was into that kind of stuff. And and I used to have an Echoplex, and I love that kind of a sound.
Right. What were you playing for guitar back then?
Uh, Early days. I think I had a Fender Jaguar. It was the first really good guitar that I bought. I saved for a long time to get that. Before that, it was just like, I think I had a National Les Paul looking thing with 2 pickups. I can't remember them all. Oh, and the 3995 Silvertone Dan Electro guitar from the Sears catalog. I had one of those.
Oh man, wicked. So now you're like your early 60s, so you're getting ready for the British invasion at this stage.
Yeah, exactly. And then when that happened, the band I was playing in, we were playing at the Seagull Club down on Hollis Street in Halifax a lot. You know, with all the sailors, and we used to call it the Shit Hawk. And there wasn't a night I played there when there wasn't a big fight on the floor, and oftentimes knives came out. It was a tough joint. But we were playing the Beatles tunes, all the early Beatles tunes back then. Our group, if it was on the radio, we were doing it.
Right on. Right. And so you had what is a 4-piece group, 5-piece group?
That would have been a 4-piece back then. Most of the ones I played in were 4.
Okay. So, and your vocals and guitar, is that what you were doing, or just guitar?
I just backup vocals. Guitar was my main thing. The other thing I would do was I'd be the guy that would sort of, figure out all the chord changes and the arrangements to the tunes and make sure everybody sang the right harmony. And I could sing in key, but my voice is horrible.
I'm the same way. I get it. I get it. So you're in 4-piece band. So were you doing it full time, or did you have a day job too, or is that what all you did?
I did have a day job then. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I did work. I eventually got into full time, but in those days I wasn't playing 6 nights a week.
Right.
Once I got into the 6 night a week thing, sometimes 7 nights a week, then of course the day job went out the window.
And you'd be touring for so many, and we've heard the stories from so many times, and I love this part of the story for maritime music, because for Sean and I, we're kind of mid 80s kids, so we kind of came into the scene mid 80s. Now we caught a glimpse of the glory days for sure, but it was never, well, I mean, certainly the scene that it is in the last 10 years, and we really believe that it's coming around now. But the amount of clubs you could play, I mean, Jackie Smith had a big conversation with us, and it's like you could tour Dartmouth for 6 weeks. You could do a stint in Halifax for 9 weeks. You could go to Sackville. You didn't have to go very far to get full-time work.
He's right. And the thing is, I remember back in those days when I look at what I was earning back then, like I acted as a band leader, so I got a little extra money to make sure that I booked everything and looked after the business. But I was making a professional man's salary.
Wow.
It was a good paycheck. And when I started my business in 1972, I saved a lot of money and made while I was playing. And of course I continued to play to build up the business. I never took money out of it, but I'm jumping ahead here from the playing. But those were the days when we could make really good money. I mean, it was wonderful. And even when I started the business, I was still doing the club gigs here, playing 7 nights a week.
So was the touring conditions different back then? Like, what would you all travel in? Like, well, here's the question, I guess. How far did you go with the band? Like, so you mentioned PEI. I presume maybe since to Newfoundland back then, would that have still been a big gig then, or no? Or
lots of Newfoundland, PEI, New Brunswick, all the Maritimes. But when I was doing that gig with Dwayne Coughlin, when that band, we spent a lot of time in Ontario. We were there for a good year, all over the province, until we got to Sarnia. They liked the band so much, they kept us for 6 months.
6 months?
6 months, one gig. The guy, accommodations, food, everything we wanted, and we played every night of the week in that bar. And what a great gig. We did that for 6 months. We just it just wore us out after a while.
Yeah.
And we headed on to other things, and then came back to the Maritimes. But yeah, that was
that's crazy. 6 months. Wow. Yeah, I can't imagine that. Like you're lucky to get 2 nights in a row now.
Oh my
My
God.
God.
Yeah, that's
So you're okay. So you're going as far as Ontario. What about now? Were you doing original stuff too, or just cover songs?
no, no. We were like a jukebox band. But you know, I'll say that the one thing with all those groups, and that I played with, a lot of good players, and we didn't like to just recite the tunes. We always put our own stamp on them.
Right on.
If there was a guitar solo on the record, I never played that one. I wanted to play my guitar solo, that kind of a thing. And so we changed the arrangements. We put, we do things to the tunes
Sure.
just to make it our own. I still feel that way today. I don't like just reciting something note for note.
No, I mean it's nice to put your own personal stamp on it, and it doesn't seem so mundane that way. If you're just playing the same song the same way, if you can do your little twisty, I get it.
Especially when you're doing like those 6 night-a-week gigs. I mean, every night we're trying to find something to do with that tune to make it more fun for us.
Exactly, and a lot of folks wouldn't understand that unless they're players. But I mean, it's sometimes we used to get in trouble from certain audience members. Like, well, that's not exactly like the record. I said, well, we're not exactly the band. If we had to do the same thing every night to night, it would get boring. You just wouldn't want to do it anymore. You just do a little twist or a little different tempo or maybe slower or fast. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Well, you're right, and it was like, it's not that we were disrespectful to the tunes, and I can't remember anybody ever coming up and saying, "Oh, what did you do to that tune?" We didn't rip them completely apart, but we had to have a little fun.
Exactly. Especially for 6 nights in a row. Yeah, do something.
Oh my God, it really beats you up.
So who are some of the players? Oh, well, let's talk about Dwayne for a second because you mentioned Dwayne's name. So you told me a little bit before we went on air, and I guess you were playing in PEI. And now, in my time, there wasn't a whole lot of places to play in PEI. There's only 2 or 3 bars left, but it was a big staple gig for you guys back then.
Yes, yeah. Milton's Old Spain is where we played all the time. That was the big bar in town, and we'd get ourselves in there and be over there as much of the summer as we possibly could. Just loved it. Yeah, and I met Dwayne there. I met George Antoniak there. The guys, the Islanders, we'd get together and jam on the Saturday. And I remember with George Antoniak, after the jam, he'd invite me to his house. We'd play guitars together, and his mother would feed us.
Right.
I mean, a lot of that is really old history, but I got to meet so many people back in those days, and remain friends today, the ones that are still here, of course.
Yeah. Okay, so that brings us back. So you're playing all through the 60s. You said whatever's hot in the radio is what. Now, what was the name of the band?
Well, the one with Dwayne we called it the Music Department.
Okay.
And then after that, I got on the road with Bill Mosley, Gary Blair, in a band. We had in the 4-piece configuration. It was Paul Mason was in that group. We called it the New Direction.
Okay.
Yeah, or as the guys would call us, the Nude Erection. So we that
I can see that on the marquee sign, eh?
Yeah, and Peter. Yeah, we had Peter Christian in that band. There was, that was a good band. That was together for quite a while, and then eventually we went to a 3-piece band. Gary Blair and Bill Mosley and I, and that was in around 1971, maybe 1970, 71, and we played as a trio all over the Maritimes.
Now,
good group.
Were you married? I mean, I know your lovely wife now. Were you guys married back then, or you're settled down?
I met my wife playing in the band trolley. I met her in Port Hawkesbury. She happened to come up to the bar with some friends. She wasn't a bar type person, but I saw her that night, and that's where. So I invited her for a coffee the next day, and that's how we met.
Good keeper, girl. Good for you.
Oh yeah.
So,
I do it right away.
Yeah. So that would So she was supportive of you during your music. You're on the road time the whole time.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, no. After I met her, I didn't do a lot of those Ontario things.
Okay.
I think the last gig I did, and it was right around the time when we just decided to start the store. I just got an open door for the first time.
And
well,
I still a good segue.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Well, in 1972 we got married. And And I used to play at Seymour Hoffman's club quite a bit on Wise Road in Dartmouth, and he had a space there, so I negotiated with him to get that space and get into retail. I mean, there's a lot of other background. I won't waste your time with tons of details, but the only time I played on the road really after meeting Sharon was I had 2 weeks at the Chateau Laurier in Ottawa. I had to finish. So we had the store started, sort of, and I had to go up there and play for a couple of weeks and finish that gig with the trolley, and then I came back, and the rest is music, store history after that. Mind you, I kept playing. All my gigs were local. Like I played the Eager Beaver Lounge in Halifax for 6 nights a week and work in the store all day. I don't know how in the hell I did it back in those days.
It's true.
But when you're young, you can do all kinds of things.
Exactly. And a lot of folks don't understand that. It's like, the kind of energy that you had to expend, even just set up, and I know, but you would have had probably an easier setup than, in the 80s stuff when you had, like, gosh, we were on the road with 6 butterfly cabinets and oh my God, the whole big Martin system that we had. We had 80 lights. Then sometimes we used to bring more. And there's 6 guys in a cube band. You might remember those cube bands. We'll talk about that in a second too. But it was a huge show that took probably 3-4 hours to load in and set up. You had to try and eat, maybe sleep, and then perform for 6-7 hours, and then try to wind down to get to bed and do it all over again the next day. It was crazy times.
Yeah, that's right. And when you got into that era, of course, it was the era of the big show and the big gear. I think I'm partially responsible for that.
I'm sure you are. We'll talk about that in a second.
but back when I was playing, we didn't do that. I'd go in my gig. I go into the gig. We had a couple of PA speakers. We might have had a couple of lights, and a guitar and an amp, and bass guitar and a bass amp, and a set of drums, and maybe a keyboard, and that's it. And there was nothing was mic'd. We didn't mic.
Absolutely, ask you now. So the drums would have been microphone, and the amps.
No.
All stage volume. Wow.
Yeah, when we needed to, we just played louder.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right, so that brings now Seymour Hoffman. Which club did he have?
He had it was Lucifer's, but it was the Matador back then.
Matador. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've heard that name 1,000 times, and I thought it was Matador, but I wasn't sure. So Matador turned to Lucifer's, Lucille's, Crazy Horse.
That might have been the biggest bar in the cities in its day. Very big place, and but he had he had a few retail spaces downstairs in the bottom floor, and just through conversation, he said, because I told him I was going to start a store. Well, I got a space for you. I got a space, and he sort of helped talk me into taking the plunge, and of course I wanted him just to have a little mom and pop music store for myself and my wife.
Yeah, mom and pop music store, Russ. Yeah, whatever. We're going to talk about that too. So you started Musicstop in the basement of the Matador. Is that right?
That's right. Yes.
Now, prior to that, I thought your first location was on on the other side, but okay.
No, but there is like a little pre thing that happened before that, where I was already selling gear before I had that. When I did a stint in Ontario for 2 years. I left that out so far, but I played in bands up there and I lived up there. But we used to go to Buffalo, New York, and there was a guy I met there, Art Kubera Music, still there today. The old guy, and he was an incredible music retailer, and I got to be friends with him. So when I decided and I came home, I wanted to start selling some gear. He says, I'll give you the gear at cost +5, and he had warehouses full of stuff. You wanted a Hammond B3 organ, he had it in stock. You wanted anything in the Fender line or any of the products that you dream about, he had them all. So I just call him up, and he'd just ship it up to me, and that's where I really started selling, because I was selling to all the local band guys, and I was selling it way cheaper than anybody else, still making a few bucks while I was doing it.
Right.
And that's what really sparked the whole thing about getting into retail. At the same time, I don't know if a lot of people know this, is that I was building speakers. I was always into electronics. My first guitar amp I built myself. My father was into electronics. He was a ham radio operator. So I had to build, because we were poor, dirt poor. We never even had a friggin' car in the family, So I had to buy secondhand and build, So and I did that, and then I started building speaker cabinets, and all the bands in town playing the bars at that time were using my cabinets.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Wow. What did
yeah,
you
my
call
word. Brannon, of course. It was kind of dumb, but yeah. Yeah, no, Mike, I had a little company. I just found we're just cleaning out our house here now, now that we're getting to our best before date. And I found an old checkbook from, I think it was like maybe 1970. And the company I called that I made the speakers, Electro Sound Research.
them? There you go.
And I got the checks here. I don't know whether to throw them away or not.
Oh, no,
Kind of,
no, no, no. In fact, if you ever get a chance, Russ, like I said, and please send them to me. Any of that old stuff you find that's gonna, I mean, this is the kind of history that people never hear. I didn't know this about you. I kind of, for some reason, I thought that you had a, not a generic brand, but something that was homemade. Now, here's me. I'm in my early 50s, so I've only really ever known Musicstop or Buckley's or
yeah,
Folklore is the three places. Well, that's not true. I guess there's McKay Music too, but there's
yeah,
only a handful of places you could buy gear. So
that's
before you
right.
came along, where would you get your gear from?
Well, Buckley's music, the original Buckley's music was I'm trying to think, Walter Donovan was the guy that owned it way back. And that's where we bought when I bought my Fender Jaguar, when we saved our money, that particular band, we all went over there. We were all saved up, and I remember going over. We got there one evening. He kept the store open for us, and he calls Santa Ana, California, and we sat there and watched him order the stuff for us. It was really
Wow.
quite neat. But yeah, he was a really good guy, and but in those days, like the way music products were distributed in Canada and sold, it was so expensive. It really was, relatively speaking. When you have to put it in today's money, but that's one of the reasons I was able to kind of begin to get in the business, because I could buy cheaper. I was buying from the US, and the Canadian music industry, I'll try not to put too much time into this, but it was all
Take your time.
distributors. It was all distributors, and there was too many people in the food chain. So by the time you got to your local store, things were really expensive. Well, I bypassed that
You
and
buy
started
direct.
buy direct. Yeah,
Ah,
changed the whole model. And of course, that made us very competitive and so on and so forth. And then the thing grew bigger than a mom and pop store, which was our original intention.
well, I mean, you had Steve's Music in Ontario and Toronto. I think there's one in Montreal too. That was, the big name, I guess, competition for Musicstop is someone get mad at
Yeah.
you, so I'm going to go buy from Steve's. That's going to really your big options. You had
Yeah.
Musicstop.
And we'd say, well, that's a long way to go for warranty.
Right on. So we're talking the early 70s now, and I guess the gear that was coming out, when you think about it, I mean, uh, everything was built in the U.S. pretty much. You would have had probably Seagull in Canada, and what else was around back then?
No, Seagull didn't exist. You're talking about Seagull guitars?
Yeah, what was it? What was the Quebec brand of guitars? That was
Godin.
oh, good answer. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know if Robert had a company back then. Quite frankly, I know Robert. He's a personal friend of mine, but I don't think he had a company then. I don't think he started then. Funny, I never thought to ask that when he actually got started in building guitars. Mind you, he makes wonderful product. I have a lot of his instruments myself.
Nice. So everything you bought was coming out of the States then. There's nothing built in Canada for gear back then.
There was nothing. Honestly, there was nothing. The only thing being built then would have been from Yorkville Sound, Trainer. Those guys were around. L&M has been around in Canada for, well, probably more than 50 years now. They started
Yorkville,
before.
no, Trainer, how does it work? Trainer, then Yorkville, is that how it worked? Or did they
Well,
merge?
Yorkville, I think Yorkville was first, and Pete Trainer, who was a guy from Truro, he designed those amplifiers.
Okay.
They picked that up, and he worked for them up there, and they built those amps and built it into a real brand.
And of course, you would have had Pacey Symbol or Zildjian, but Zildjian came out of New Brunswick too, right? That's what their plan was, right?
That's right. That moved to New Brunswick.
Right.
What happened to Sabian?
Sabian, sorry. Sabian.
Yeah, there was
I'm not a drummer, sorry.
That's okay. There was a rift in the Zildjian family, and
Yes.
And one of the guys' brothers went to New Brunswick, and of course there was funds available there to start manufacturing, and they started building that brand in Canada. But yeah, there wasn't a lot. There was some boutique guitars and things being built in Canada, but most of it out of the U.S. I mean, the big brands were you know, obviously the Fender, Gibson things and all of those. But the big amplifier, and that's one of the things that launched our business, was custom. You remember the Roland Pleat Custom? You're probably too young to remember that. They were made, instead of having like regular Tolex, they had Roland Pleat covering. Very cool looking stuff. But it was a very high quality product. It was made by a company out of Chinook, Kansas. And I don't know if you ever got a speeding ticket, but the radar guns,
Yeah.
they're made by that company. Custom Signals makes the radar guns. And that's the same company that made the amplifiers. They're very high quality, really, really good. So that really launched Musicstop, because I started handling that product. They sold me factory direct and gave me preferential pricing because they had no market in Canada.
Right.
And that was just a huge launch for us. I went to my first NAMM show. Do you know what the NAMM show?
Oh, yeah.
National? Yeah. I went to my first NAMM show in Chicago, early 70s. Oh, there's my phone.
That's all right.
What did I just do?
It's okay. Don't worry about a thing.
Hello. She's out right now.
He's
and
retired.
I better go. I'm doing something else, but I'll talk to you a little later, buddy. Okay? Yeah. Yeah. So I went to the NAMM show, and
What year was that? Your first NAMM show? What year?
I'm going to have to say it might have been about 1974.
Wow.
And I went there, and the custom, I had been selling the custom product, and I went to the show, and I couldn't believe it. They had the biggest booth at the show. It was like 2 stories high. The amount of gear they had was incredible. And I had already been buying some gear and getting good prices from them. And I got talking to my sales rep, and I said, "You got any deals, Fred?" The guy's name was Fred Holmes. He said, "Well, the only deal I got is the show." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, after the show's over, we pack all this stuff up and sell it." Ooh. I looked, and I said, "What's the price?" And he told me the price. It was incredible. He said, "I'll ship it to you." Well, when it got to my store, I did buy it. It was 2 50-foot trailers full. I had it on the street one night, had to keep somebody outside to keep it from being stolen.
Were you still on Wise Road? Were you still under the Matador?
Yeah,
no.
in that little store, it was just jammed with gear. And underneath that, by the way, we had our recording studio. We had that was the beginnings of Solar Audio. We're in the basement under that store.
There was a lot of talk on my site about that. People couldn't remember exactly where it was, and I think Jackie was right that one, because he said it was actually under the Matador. I didn't know that Musicstop started there. This is news to me. So you had Musicstop and Solar Audio underneath the Matador. That's right.
Wow. Exactly. I had a studio before I had the store. I had a studio on Waverly Road for a while. Yeah. I'm just trying to think, the band Killer Egg. You ever heard of Killer Egg?
Bon Shepherd.
They recorded with us there. Yeah.
Is that right?
That was long before Solar Audio. It wasn't called Solar Audio. I can't even remember what I called it then. Yeah.
Wow. This is great history. This is awesome, Russ. I really appreciate you sharing this stuff with me, because it's news to me now. It might be not news for a lot of folks, but
well, it's a little older history than probably a lot of your guests might be.
Well, sure, but I mean, we have a kind of a dynamic age range. We have from age 15 to age 80, and anywhere in between. So, yeah. I think the young kids nowadays, I mean, they don't have well, I still love personally. This is my favorite thing to do. Now, maybe you did this in the early days, because it sounds like you might have been a wheeler dealer back then too. I love going to the Sobeys, and you used to have the bulletin board there. You can buy gear. People put the thumbtack up there. You can buy gear. I used to get amazing deals there. But now people go online, they can see what things are really worth. It's like, you're never going to get a deal that way.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the Sobeys bulletin board. Yeah, that was the Kijiji of the time.
Exactly. Even before Bargain Hunter. But anyway, I digress. So you had that store on Wise Road. You're clearly getting too big, and the amplification seems to be the mainstay, I guess, now. But I mean, the gear was so big back then. You're talking about Hammond V3 organs. Oh my God. How many could you have in your store? One, maybe?
We carry them. We carry them in the big 122 Leslie. For a period as a guitar player, and during that period, one of the bands I had, we played around town with. It was like a trio, and we had Davy Wells singing out front, and and I used a Fender twin amplifier and a Leslie 122, and I had it switched so I could go back and forth between the guitar amp and the 122 Leslie. I mean, a guitar through that thing powered by the twin reverb amp, it sounded like the wrath of God.
Wow.
I mean, it was incredible. And of course, I had the speed control on a foot switch, so I sounded like an organ. I mean, what a sound.
So what would you use it for? I mean, I can only think of Crimson and Clover, but what else would you use it for back then? You know what I mean?
Oh, you could. Well, what would you use an organ for?
Ah.
Think of it that way, Dave. I'd use it in any and every tune because when you can have that rotor speeding up and slowing down, it creates this huge stereophonic effect. We used to play the Surf Club all the time, and I used that setup. They loved the sound of it. Yeah.
So that would have been probably predating the wah-wah pedal, really. I mean, it would have been before then. I mean, I think wah-wah wasn't really prevalent until like early 70s, probably.
Yeah, no, I think the wah-wah might have been around at that time because I was using a wah-wah back in those days. I was always a bit of a gear pig when it came to technology myself.
Gear pig. I love that term, gear pig.
Yeah, so I had the tech, and of course I did a lot of my own wiring. So that Leslie setup was just something I dreamed up, and boy, that was great.
So you really started the store just to suit your own needs, and I'm a gear pig. I'm an electronics guy. I need something to do with my spare time. I was a place to find a place to sell that shit.
You hit the nail on the head. The only reason I did that was to support my music habit.
Awesome, I love it. I love it.
It's just like a drug, right?
So take us back now. So now at some point you have to overgrow the bottom of the Matador, Lord God in heaven, because I mean, I know what happens with Musicstop, and a lot of folks will you know, anybody who's watching the show now will remember how big this store got. So you're there, and then when did you move out of the Matador?
That would have been, I think we were only there for about 2 years, and then we moved across the street. The Sobeys Mall got a great big opening in there, big enough for us where I wanted to take the store, because we were doing a lot of heavy duty PA gear back then. We needed more space. And I had a service department. Actually, one of the guys I used to build, one of my old buddies, Bill Uxner, who I used to build amplifiers with, he was a good tech, so I hired him to be my tech, right? So we went across the street. There was a huge place, and we got ourselves moved in there. We stayed there until 1983. So we had a good 8 or 9 years in there before we outgrew that and had to go again. That's when we moved to Kennard Street in 1983. I bought the building on Kennard. I
was just about to ask you that if you bought the building, because somewhere along the line, I mean, especially in the 80s were really some crazy times. I mean, if you were early 80s paying a mortgage on that place over in Halifax, it would have been, kind of a crazy rate, 15, 20, 25% interest rates for mortgages back in the early 80s. So did it make more sense to rent or to own the property?
Well, the thing is, even though the interest rates were high, but your rents kind of reflected that too, because the landlord that owned the property you were renting from had to deal with those rates as well. No, it worked out. I bought that building. I got it at the right price, and I just was tired of paying rent to somebody else.
Yeah,
quite frankly. And from that day on, pretty well, we didn't rent anymore, with only a few exceptions as we grew.
So you moved from Dartmouth and still only had the one main store on Kennard Street, right? That was the one store at the time, early in the 80s, right?
Yes. Well, yes. We on Wise Road, I did buy a store across the street from the Sobeys strip, and we opened our stereo shop. We started selling, high-end, hi-fi stereo.
I do remember that.
I bought that store. Yes. Yeah, so we did that, and then we did go over to Kennard Street, and then the next move was I bought on Main Street.
Yes.
There's an L&M store there. That's the store I usually shop at, actually, now.
Yeah, me too. I do too.
The business there. Yeah.
Okay, so now let's talk about Kennard Street, because that place is famous. I mean, that's what most musicians, I think, in probably Halifax in 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, that's when they would have frequented the most, I'm sure. Because there you still had Solar Studios, right? You had brought Solar Studios over there?
Oh yeah. Well, what happened was when we put that studio in, we did a serious job. Bought a new console, a lot of new equipment. We hired Claude Fortier from the National Research Council to come down and design the room. He was an expert in acoustics, and he gave us a whole set of plans. He designed the studio monitors and we invested. That was the best studio in Atlantic Canada for many, many years. And
So
that was upstairs in that building.
What were some of your favorite recordings that came out of there?
Oh my, favorite recordings. You know, I mean, by the time that got there, I didn't work in that studio much myself as an engineer. I used to do a lot of that in the old studio.
Right.
Harold Sestinas was our engineer in the early days there. But anybody in the Maritimes who was recording at that time who had a name, whether it was Matt Minglewood's band, you remember that, the Red album. Maybe you might not remember that. But that came out of there. That was a nice recording. I worked on that one. Oh my heavens! There's so many artists went through there. It's like to try to pick them all out, because out of the local artists, there was just anybody who, whether it was Snake Eye or Molly Oliver. This as you get to close to your best before date, your memory, you start to forget all the all the bands and that goes by.
I'm gonna try something here, Russ. Just give me 1 second. I'm gonna try plugging into this Ethernet now because I'm getting a little bit of internet issues. If I freeze for a second, I'll be right back. It'll be okay.
Sure.
I'm just gonna try this little cord here. This is how high tech we are, right? There. So let's just see if my internet gets any better here. Just give me a second, and should be good now. Oh, in a second it will be. There. We'll take a copy. There. That should be all right. Seem better now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of the favorite recordings, just to go back to your question there. One thing I was involved in, even before that, quite frankly, starting on the Wise Road version of the studio, and then over to the Kennard Street I took on publishing with Bobby Quinn. Do you know who Bobby Quinn is?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I would say Bob was probably the most prolific songwriter ever in Atlantic Canada, and a great songwriter. So we made a deal. We'd share the publishing. He would write the songs, and I'd use spare inventory in the studio to record his songs. So if the studio didn't have a paying customer, he could come in and bring people in and he used the best players in town, and he'd record his songs. Amazing. You talk about favorite stuff. He wrote so many great songs, and my job was to sell them. So I remember one incident was Roger Whittaker, the first sale I made, and we were actually that was just before we moved. That was probably about early '80s, and he needed a place to rehearse, and they wanted to get our studio to rehearse. I said, I don't need any money, but he has to listen to 2 songs at the end. So they rehearsed for a number of days. At the end of it, I remember it was kind of winter. He's putting on his winter coat and heading for the door. I said, a couple of songs you have to listen to. Oh, harump for rump. He sits down. I played 2 of Bob's songs for him. And he's sitting there and his eyes are like saucers. He said, my God, that's good. My God, that's good. Have you got any more? We spent hours that night playing Bob's tunes, and he wound up recording well in excess of 20 on his albums. And he's a worldwide artist, that guy.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was one of just talk about some of the favorite things. I mean, that was a nice bit of history. And of course, Bob and I both made royalties on that from publishing. And I also got one on an Anne Murray album, which was when she was at the top of her career. I knew her from before anyway, but yeah, at least I got one of his tunes to her.
Wow. That's so cool. That's really cool. I did not know that part of it.
Yeah, that's a little solar sidebar, But
okay, but now you get into music instruction, right? Because now you're going to have the conservatory starts probably around this time too. Is that right?
Yeah, that was when we got to Kennard Street. That we had the space for the school, and so I knew I wanted to be in that business because I really felt it was part of the package. You got to build musicians to buy your instruments.
I love your vision. I really love your vision.
Yeah,
Honest God, Russ.
they call that vertical integration. So I consulted with a fellow in Quebec who was very successful, and he told me how to do it, and we started from there, and we got up into 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 students over time. Yeah.
Russ, give me 1 second, all right? I'm just gonna give me 1 second.
Enjoying it. I'm having some fun. I usually don't get to tell these stories.
Well, I'm the guy who loves the stories, because quite honestly, now I might as well fess up to you folks. Now, Russ, are you still in Dartmouth, or where do you live now, Russ?
Dartmouth.
So yeah, we're in two different places, but we both had to have a pee break. I did first, so I had to pee and Russ had to pee. So now we're back. Here's what I love about your story so far, because to me, it's brilliant. You created a need, you filled a need, and you kept the need going by promoting. And I guess we can start to get into R&R productions here soon too, because it was a really brilliant business model, right? You expanded. Okay, let's go back, because now we're in the conservatory. You're teaching folks how to play music. You had some of the best players around at the time, teaching and working at the store.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
What was your staff like back then?
When I look at back then at the staff, by the time we sold our store to Long and McQuaid, most of them were still with us. We had so many lifers, and the interesting thing is, you go in the stores today, and they're same people that we hired good. Now I got to credit my wife a lot with that. She's such a good judge of character. And I'm the guy with all the big ideas, just leaving a mess all around me. And somebody had to clean up my messes.
Yeah.
and her and that other team. But when it came to hiring, she was the person who vetted the staff and as well as me, but me from maybe your know-how, your technical those ideas, and from her point of view, it's who you are.
Yeah.
Do you fit our culture? And we made so many great hires and great friends they became. Some of them are obviously retiring now. I'm not going to start naming names because I'll just be insulting somebody.
Yeah, if you forget somebody,
by leaving somebody out.
Yeah.
But there was so many.
I'll name Neil Mckinnon, because Neil Mckinnon was, when I was a keyboard player in the 80s, he was my go-to guy. He understood that Yamaha product like nobody. They had the big old cartridges back then. You jam them in to your DX7 or your DX5 that I had.
A wonderful man, a wonderful musician.
Yeah. So he was always my go-to guy for the keyboard part. Guitars back then, I'm trying to think it's probably Rick Madokas. I think Rick is.
Rick,
yeah.
My friend. Yeah.
Anyhow, so let's talk about the conservatory. That's still going, is it not?
Yes. Yeah, well, what happened when L&M bought the business, and that's 10 years ago now, maybe a little more.
I still call it Musicstop. I'm sorry. I'll always call it Musicstop. To me, it's always going to be Musicstop. So.
Oh, thank you. But the reason I did sell to them was because they had a business model very similar to ours, where they did all the same components. They really looked after the industry the same way that I envisioned it for the most part. Nothing's ever exact, but the nice thing is when they took over the business, they kept everybody. It wasn't like they come in and cleaned their. We talked about that. That was important to me at the time, that they keep the staff and don't wreck things. No, they invested a lot in those stores, and they did a pretty good job. If I had even a bit of a complaint is the variety of stock has narrowed a bit, because they're a distributor as well, and they need to promote their own products. Of course, I get that as a business guy. But but that was a satisfying transaction that when they bought the store, and it was the right time, and for us in our life. At that point, I was in the business for more than 35 years.
35 years.
Yeah.
So you expanded pretty quick though, Russ, and I was kind of I don't know if I was mad back then, because sometimes variety is nice. And I'll be honest, back in my day, in the early 80s when I first started playing, I kind of go back and forth between, because I saw what Musicstop had, I saw what Buckley's had. I loved dealing with John over at Buckley's. He was my guy at Buckley's, right? I bought my BC Rich Warlock from John over at Buckley's. You know, that was my hot pink BC Rich
Yes.
Warlock.
Yeah.
But if you trust check my account of Musicstop, Dave and Kristen, you know, I'm 60 grand in, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure, over the years. So
So were you a keyboard player or a guitar player?
early on, I was a guitar player, you know, and I just probably like a lot of guitar players. It's like there's some really good virtuoso guitar players that start to stem out. It's like, gosh, you know, and I started probably earlier than folks in my generation, but I didn't have the discipline, I guess. They would lock themselves in. Kevin McCann locked himself in his room for 6 months. Came out, I was like, oh my God, it's like, where did he come from, right?
Yeah.
I was like, maybe I'll play keyboards instead. There's not enough keyboard players around, but they were expensive, those freaking keyboards. So now I've been playing bass for the last 25 years. So there you go. 4 strings, how hard could it be, right? So,
hey, bass player, most important guy in the band, as far as I'm
amen,
concerned.
brother. Amen.
Yeah.
All right. So now we have Musicstop, we have Solar, we have Conservatory. For our friends who are musicians and they're watching this show, let's talk a little bit about R&R. Now, a lot of folks don't know that Dwayne's real name is Russell Dwayne. So R&R Productions was Russ and Russ, right?
Yeah. That was Dwayne Coughlin and I put that together because he was one of the biggest booking agents in town, and one of the things that was an impediment to that all happening from both of our points of view was, you know, having gear and transportation. So in our R&R, we put PA packages together and a vehicle to drive them in. So the band, all you guys had to do was just have good music, and we'll set you up and put you on the road. And that worked very well. We did that for quite a long time.
I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but I'm thinking, could that have been profitable? Oh my God. Because I know that I was in back then, Nexus Energy and Cradle. We were pretty good, but I know there's some other folks that weren't so nice to the gear that you guys were providing. And we had our gear from Kevin Woodworth. He owned his own PA system. But
you're right. You hit the nail right on the head, Dave. I don't know whether we lost money, but we certainly never made any money. But it was one of those things that it was part of the industry. It facilitated. I'll tell you another truth like that. All the years that I owned a recording studio, which is longer than I was in the music retail, I don't think I ever made money. All you do is just invest it back into more gear. I can't think of an occasion when I took $1 out of that business in all those years. 40 years, ran a business for 40 years, took nothing out of it. But, you know, I love that business. You know, sometimes it's more than money. And R&R was kind of one of those things. We kind of enjoyed the experience of doing that. Yeah, it got a little difficult. We had those Hino trucks and they started breaking down and the bills were really big. Whoa, you know. So eventually it caused us to just say, whoa, this is just, it's not going to work.
Right.
And we backed out. But we tried.
Well, you're right. Because I mean, and the more I'm talking to you, Russ, it's like I'm getting more and more, and I had a lot of respect for you before the show started, but you were instrumental, no pun intended, to the entire music industry surviving here, because you did everything. You were renting gear, so that was before probably Peter was doing anything with Tortech, I'm sure, because you were renting PA systems, you were building PA systems, for God's sakes. You had all the best gear in town. Oh, here, I want to ask you this question. So I know from Buckley's and Folklore and Musicstop, again, with the big three in Halifax for us, anyhow. Yeah. Did you have rights for all the gear? Because I know there's certain gear you could get at Buckley's you couldn't get at Musicstop, and not much. Excuse me.
No, that's true. That is true. The way the distribution was in Canada, that, you know, once you had access to a line of product, for instance, whether it was PV or, you know, pick a line, it was pretty exclusive. I can't say that universally with every product, but with most products it was that way. If I was a real strong dealer and really supporting that particular product, they wouldn't allow anybody else to sell it. They didn't want to water down, you know, and of course, companies like Buckley's, they had things as well. Matter of fact, it was actually L&M in Yorkville who were more supportive of Buckley's back in those days.
Okay.
You know, just because I wasn't as interested in their products. So I wasn't selling Yorkville sound equipment, none of it. You know, the big competitor in those days was PV and other things, Electro Voice, and we had other products that were competitive. So it kind of got divided that way, and that's how these companies survived. You got to have some exclusivity, it seems, to make any amount of money, because once it becomes just a very big competitive mess, then all of a sudden the prices go down. It's great for the consumer, except that eventually it puts the dealers out of business, or they don't want to stock the stuff anymore, or there's a lot of things go wrong. They don't want to support it anymore.
I watched that store grow. I mean, I can think back to my early days going to Musicstop, and of course, you're still selling sheet music then, and there's so many different lines of products that were so. I just love going in. I could spend all day. And that was the cool thing that you guys would do, is that you allow a kid like me just starting to play to come in and experiment all day long. It's like I never felt rushed or that I was in somebody's way, and
that was by design. We didn't want, we wanted you to play those instruments. We wanted you to be interested in music. And the other thing is we did, you may not know this, we would often give credit to an underage person.
Oh, yeah, I do know that, because I was actually going to go there next. I was going to talk about the LTRs.
Yes, well, that's right. Well, we would do, it's not illegal. It's just that we just can't legally collect it. You know what I mean? But if we believed in somebody, and we did, many people,
oh, yeah,
sure, we'd give them credit. We wanted them to have that guitar that they wanted.
Mike Barstools used to scare the shit out of me, Russ. I'm gonna be really honest. So I had
good old Mike. Oh yeah, he was great. He got his job very good.
I can see him guys suggest, Dave, I know you guys aren't playing this week, but I really need some money. It's like, oh. Dave.
Well, we understood that one of the reasons we succeeded, we understood musicians, and that it's not like a regular job where your paycheck is absolutely bullet solid week after week, and we learned to be flexible that way. And that's how. It was interesting. I remember when I was trying to do banking, and the banker would look at it. You're doing what with this credit stuff? To the banker, and. I remember I had an accountant with me once, and he asked the banker, he said, well, what's your normal loss rate on your credit portfolio? And the banker gave him a number. He said, yeah, well, he said, theirs is smaller. Yeah. And the reason ours was smaller is because the people that we were financing, they were the tools of the trade. They needed them. And the relationship between us was important to them. Whereas other credit, dealing with a bank, a lot of people would say, I don't give a shit. I'm not going to pay you,
Yep.
But that rarely happened. I got to tell you, we had so little loss because, there was a trust. We understood the customer, and the trust was there, and it really works. And of course, L&M does the same thing. Hats off to them. They understood that as well.
Wow, that's a very good point. And I wondered those numbers because I'm in finance world now. That's kind of what I do. And I see numbers, and it's like, oh, your loss of repossession, this and that, and it obviously has an impact on how I'm able to take my business and borrow. I guess how what my loss ratio is. And I wondered, is it back then? It's like, gosh, it's like, I mean, it was a small town. You couldn't really go anywhere. It's not like it's like, I'm not going to pay Musicstop, and I'm just, look, you're gonna pay eventually because you're gonna see you play around town. You're gonna use that gear. But it was more than that. It's like you said, there was a trust factor. And you're part of a community, part of a culture, part of a family. And I talk about that a lot. It's just Maritime 16 is
true.
Really part of a family, right?
That is true.
So let's talk about your expansion now, because that surprised me, actually, because I thought you kind of had it made. But then you expand. How many stores did you end up having at the end?
9.
9 stores.
Yeah. Well, we got to a place where I think the thing that changed it all, which really changed a lot of things in my world, was when we bought the stereo shop. Then when we bought the Dartmouth store, it started to become a problem. Now we had 3 locations. Inventory control was starting to become a problem. Management issues arose, and I decided I need a computer system. Otherwise, I can't do this. I'll try to keep this short, but it's an important component when you ask about expansion. So what I did is in 1986, because I couldn't find anything that would suit our industry the way I thought it should work, I wrote a spec. Actually, we went on vacation to Bermuda for 2 weeks with the kids, and I spent the whole 2 weeks with a notebook, and I wrote the specs for a computer system. I come back, I hired 2 computer science graduates from Dell, and I had them write the program for the store. And the main thing was to get the inventory and the receivables under control. So I had those spec'd out, and we wrote those. We got them done, and as soon as we got the stores running comfortably, the next thing we did was a point of sale system. As soon as we did that, it was easy to expand. I mean, the world just all of a sudden, because we did something nobody else had done before up to that point. We did it in real time, where everybody was doing these modems and day-end feeds of information, trying to marry it up. It was a disaster. We did it real time. We had a modem live between the stores. So I knew every moment of the day what was going on in all the locations. We were the first people to do that.
Wow.
I was saying, I'll give you this very quickly, but it's an important part of why I expanded, but also what happened afterwards. By doing that, all of a sudden, my photocopier salesman who owned Halifax Office Products looked at what we were doing. He says, "We're trying to buy a computer system." So I showed his CFO, and they bought my system. And all of a sudden, I started, another light come on. There's another business. Well, that business is still in business today, and we sell worldwide. We're in 40 countries.
I didn't even know that. So you have a point of sale system. Wow.
The company is called Maplewave. It's very successful. We deal mostly now in the telecom industry. Like if you go into a store, like say Eastlink locally, the software is ours, right? That's the stuff. That's the offshoot of what was built back then.
Wow.
So when I did that, just to go back to your question of expansion, it was easy. So there was people calling me and saying, "Look, I want to sell. I want to get out." And so we started buying. The first one was an ask. Eventually, we went to other people in other areas we thought we'd like to go to and say, "Are you ready to get out of business yet, or would you like to talk about it?" And if they did, we'd do a deal. So we wound up with 1, 2, 3 stores in New Brunswick, in Newfoundland, in St. John's, Newfoundland. And of course in Nova Scotia, up in the valley. 3 locally in the Metro Halifax as well. And then we were just buying a store in PEI when L&M came knocking. They were after me for years.
Is that right?
So, them, of course, yeah. Because they were in an expansion mode across Canada. Very successful company, and I just looked at it and thought it was the time. You have to know when your best before date arrives.
You said that 3 times now, but listen, I don't think we've seen the best of Russ Brannon yet. I don't think we have. I mean, I had no idea about that point of sale software. That's you know what? It sounds very similar to what you do when you go into Canadian Tire or Best Buy now. But this store has it, and they can look online and see it. Yeah. So it's the same kind of idea, right?
Absolutely, yeah, that's right. We were early on it, and then when the internet came along, I would argue we might have been the first company, I should say, in the world to do a point of sale via internet. So when the cellular industry started to grow at the dawn of the cellular industry, we had, I know we had one company in the US with 500 stores running on our server here in Halifax in real time.
Oh my God, that's wicked.
I know, yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? So, but it's just, it's a crazy thing when you start doing these things, they take on a life of their own. And sometimes, Dave, you just got to follow the train. You know what I mean? It's like, it just tells you where you need to go next. You know,
I get it.
I'm not sitting here trying to tell you I'm some visionary. I just follow the train, type of thing. It becomes obvious at some point that this is the next thing you should do.
Well, success to me has always been when opportunity and preparedness meet. So, I mean, clearly, you've had opportunities, but you were, it wasn't by accident. I don't believe in luck. I don't believe in that kind of stuff. I think you were prepared each time something new came around, and you saw the opportunity, and went with it.
Yeah, being lucky enough to recognize it at the right moment is I think it's very important.
Well, I would call it maybe more either ballsy or naive, one or the other. It's like, wow, let's see what happens.
That too. I'm telling you, like some of the stuff I've done, in my business career, like not being naive actually helped me sometimes. You know?
Let me ask the one question now, and we're getting low on time because I know I'm taking up your whole morning here. I know you got to go like all too, Russ. I can't even tell you how much I appreciate this conversation. I think we'll probably have to do a part two because I know Sean's gonna be pissed off that he missed this interview. I'm gonna tell you right now, he's gonna be pissed off because he's been asked about drums and blah blah blah. Nobody wants to hear about drums. They don't. Right?
Exactly. But no, to give Sean my best regards, of course, and yes, look, there's so much has gone on in the industry certainly over my time in it.
I want to ask you two questions. I got two parts. Ready?
Yep.
What's your biggest regret over all those years?
Biggest regret? You know, that's a hard one to answer. You know what? This is not a huge thing, but I go back to the fact that I started as a musician. And I really want to be a musician. You know, this other stuff just sort of creeps in there, and you know, and I could have been a better musician today if I had stayed in. You know, I have so many friends that are great players, and I look at them and say, boy, I wish I had stayed in. You know, it's not like it doesn't eat my heart out every day, but you know.
Are you going to go back to no piano lessons again? Are you going to talk about that piano lesson thing again now, Russ?
Yeah, exactly. But you know, but those, you have to make choices, and sometimes there's always something good, and there's always something that's maybe not. I wish I had it done, you know, and that would have been one, I guess. So, what was your second question?
Second question is, what do you feel like your biggest accomplishment was?
Wow, biggest accomplishment. Well, I think, you know what, I think meeting the right wife.
Good answer. Good answer.
Well, yes, it is, but you need somebody who can keep you, you know, focused and straight. You know, don't let you wander off into, you know. I could have started a lot of unsuccessful businesses probably without some cautionary tales. No, I guess it's that, and of course, you know, having a family that's healthy and well and all that stuff, that's an accomplishment. You know, just to be able to get up every day and know that all those things are right. You know, I know that sounds maybe a bit hokey, but
no, you know. Not at all, not one bit. And I'll be quite honest with you, Russ. Like, it's been, oh man, I feel like I've known you my whole life now, but at the same time, I feel like we're kind of kindred spirits. I appreciate your vision. I appreciate what you did for maritime music. I appreciate these stories, you know, and I can't wait to hear more. I can't wait to have people hear them, because it's more than just, you know, like people say, he's got tons of money, he doesn't care about people. You did what you did because you cared about this family, did about this community. And yes. I love your first answer. You started the story because you were a gear pig and wanted to self-serve a little bit. That's awesome. Yeah. But you did so much, Russ, and it's still in existence today because of Long and McQuaid, and they acquired those stores. But you left a legacy, brother. You like there's a legacy there, you know, due to Russ Brannon, and I'm excited to say thank you very much, you know, on behalf of you know, you as a friend, as a musician, as just another human being. That was great, and no, this has been a great time talking to you.
Oh, thanks, Dave. It was my pleasure.
Oh, we're gonna get you back, I guarantee, because there are gonna be 1,000 questions after this. I should have asked him this. Yes. You should have asked him this. You should. You know what? It's my freaking show. I'll say what I want to do.
Well, that's right. And there's lots of subjects we probably could have taken a deeper dive on. I'd be happy to do it.
Well, you know what? Then that's a promise from Russ Brannon that he'll come back again. I'm gonna run now, but wow, you give me a lot to think about today, and I really appreciate that. Thanks so much for being on the show.
My pleasure.
All right, Russ Brannon, we're out.
Okay.
Take care.
Okay, Dave.